Serious quiz. Okay, we're recording. All right, Devon, what's up?
Well, we were going to talk about your book today.
I'm just going to stand here the whole time like this and eat from behind it. That's the level of pimpitude that I'm going to put forward today. Shameless pimpitude. All right. So
I
I asked you if you could ask me some questions about things you liked about the book, things you thought maybe people wanted further clarification on, things you
yeah,
thought like, wow, people really need to know this like one thing or two things or whatever. So
yeah.
fire away. I'm all yours.
Well, I think the first thing you should explain the story behind the title, because I think there was a little bit of confusion about
Okay,
that.
so there's five basic rules the way I set the diet up. And number one is before you begin any diet or exercise program, you want to talk to your doctor first. Is this annoying that I'm looking up like this? I think it is, but I'll look down at that. So you want to talk to your doctor first. You want to make sure that your exercise and diet program will not kill you because dead people don't lose weight, they decompose. So that's where the title came from. It was the number one rule because I've worked in commercial gyms my whole life. We always had a rule before people could train with you, they had to have a Part Q and see a doctor first. So, because this book is about my system, that's been my system for the last 24 years. I wasn't going to be like an actor on the stage at the Oscars or your annoying Uncle Bobo at dinner and start commenting to depth on subjects I had no understanding of. Right? I only want to talk about things I know, and that's what I know. Working as a trainer who's working with people who I know are healthy enough to follow my diet and exercise results without dropping dead. So that's where the idea of dead people don't lose weight came from. It's rule number one. So rule number one of the system is see your doctor first. Make sure your diet and exercise program are not going to kill you. Rule number two is take your current body weight, multiply it times 10, eat that many calories a day. Some people need a little bit more calories. Some people need a little less. It's really irrelevant. The most important thing is get started. Step three is drop 10% of your body weight. Step four is once you drop 10% of your body weight, go on maintenance calories for 1 week to 1 month. That's somewhere on body weight times 12 to 15. Eat that many calories a day. And then reassess. After you've been able to successfully maintain your weight for 1 week to 1 month on maintenance calories, assess, do I need to lose more weight? Am I okay with the weight I'm at? If I'm okay with the weight I'm at, then I just do maintenance forever until I need a tune up. Say I'm going to go on a vacation or something like that. If I need to
Right.
lose more weight, I start over at the top again. I go see my doctor to make sure I'm not being delusional. My doctor says, no, it's probably a good idea if you use another 10%, you just start the process all over again. So that's where the title came from. Originally was dead people don't lose weight, they decompose, but it didn't really flow off the tongue as well.
Mm-hmm.
As well, I'm long-winded. I don't need my book title to be long-winded. It's just too much. So that's where the title came from. It was basically the foundation of the whole. If you understand those five things, the rest of the book is really just window dressing to help you further apply the information to yourself. But
Right.
that's where the title came from. Is that an adequate explanation?
That's perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then
So
you always get that one a-hole who always be like, well, actually, my dead people do lose. And it's like, you're missing
yeah,
the point, right?
right.
Come on. It's a catchy title. It's supposed to catch your eye. So you look at the information on the inside, right?
Right.
You see all these stupid infomercial things that are catchy and catching people's attention. This is at least is something good. It's good information. I'm not lying to people.
Mm-hmm.
So I played a little bit of the marketing game, yes, but that's why it's called that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome. All right. What else? What else do you got for me?
Well, I think the one fundamental piece that the book is built off of is why calories matter, and like understanding how to use that to your advantage rather than living in denial of it, because a lot of diets are really like you talked about that. You use this analogy, like a lot of diets, it's like there's this Wizard of Oz behind the curtain, and that
Yes.
Wizard of Oz is always a calorie deficit of all
Yes.
these diets. So what your book basically does is give people a clear starting point, like the 10% or 10 times body weight, um, a starting point for using those, like finding a calorie number to follow and then adjusting from there. So can you expand on that a little bit?
Well, okay. So I'll give you an example. I train a guy who does IT. And one day he came to the gym and we were kidding around because, I'm really twitchy and I'm bopping around all over the place. And it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And my total step count, I didn't do a workout at all, was like 12,500 steps. I didn't do any cardio, no walking. That's just what I do is I'm bouncing around all over the gym. he's an IT guy, and basically he'd been up since like 5 a.m. that morning, and he had 1,250 steps from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. I had over 12,000 steps from 6 a.m. till 4 p.m. That's obviously someone whose multiplier would be low, that current body weight times 10, and that's in pounds, by the way, not kilograms. If you're watching this and you follow the metric system, just multiply it times 2.2. That's all. But that's someone obviously would need a lower caloric multiplier because his energy output isn't that high, right? Whereas mine, from not even having done a workout yet, is fairly high just because my non-exercise activity thermogenesis, my NEAT, is off the charts. So the idea is you want to start somewhere. And who knows? Hey, maybe that guy could lose weight on current body weight times 10. I always try to tell people, you try to lose weight on the biggest and lowest multiplier you can. So if you're a very big person and you have a lot of room to work with, and I have a whole analogy with London broil and baby back ribs that I can get into later on that, but I don't go on too much of a tangent. But if you're a large person and say you weigh 300 pounds, well, that's got you at 3,000 calories per day. You have so much leeway in terms of fiber and protein and vitamins and nutrients. In 2,000 calories or 2,400 calories a day, you probably could afford to do current body weight times 8 if you're a 300-pound person, and you still wouldn't wind up with a nutritional deficiency. But let's say you're a 120-pound person. Good luck getting all the nutrients you need at 1,200 calories a day, right? So you may need a slightly higher multiplier so you can meet your basic nutritional needs. And yeah, your weight loss may not be as great, but you only weigh 120 pounds. What are you expecting? To lose weight, to become inert? I mean, it's like, so I always tell like bigger people, look, if you can get away with the lower multiplier because you have so many more calories to play with, fantastic. You'll still lose weight. If you're a 300-pound person, you'll probably still lose weight on 3,000 calories a day if you're moderately active. But if you can afford to take that bigger deficit, fantastic. Likewise, if you're someone who really struggles with dieting, try to get away with the biggest multiplier you can because that'll give you the most food and make the diet more sustainable. If you're the kind of person, and notice how I'm getting very individualized here. This doesn't say Shank's religion, and this says shut up and do what I say. I know that sells a lot nowadays, but that's not, again, I wrote a book based on what I've seen work in the gym over 24 years, and everyone does this shut up. It makes about as much sense as going to the Middle East and saying, here's the way religion should be done. We know how that works out, not too well, right? Because we know different things work for different people. So some people who need to be motivated, they try to get away with a much smaller multiplier so they can lose more weight quickly. Now, that can backfire on you. But again, it's all these different things to figure out your multiplier. I always say start with 10. That gives you a starting point from which you can adjust from there. So the general rules is if you're very inactive, go with the lower multiplier, 8 or 9. If you're very active, you could have, I mean, Tour de France riders, their multiplier is like 20 to 25 per day, right? Maybe even more. If you're a big person, you can use a lower multiplier, 8 or 9, because that'll give you a bigger caloric deficit and won't affect you because you'll get your nutrients in. If you're a smaller person, you might need to use a higher multiplier to get your basic nutrients in, and you'll just have a slower rate of weight loss. So it's all of that summed up in start at 10 and figure out how it applies to you. And even then, I would say everything I just said is nonsense. I think you should start at 10 and then see how it applies to you as an individual. Don't just start out and assume that current body weight times 8 or current body weight times 12 is right for you, because it may not be. I mean, that's how individual things. There was an article Lyle McDonald once wrote talking about how different gut microbiome might affect the type of diet you might lose weight on, since there's different kind of gut hormones that respond to different macronutrients. Like one he talked about was certain gut microbiomes respond very well to fats and some respond very well to carbs. So if you're the kind of person who, for just by the grace of God or Darwin, has X amount of hormones in your gut that respond well to carbs, you'll probably get more full house, whatever. I hate that show. But anyway, Uncle Jesse, you'll get more full off a higher carb diet. And then you'll go and you'll scream at everyone that the meat eater, high protein zone people are all fools. And then if you're the kind of person who probably has the kind of gut microbiome that responds well to higher protein, higher fat, you'll assume that all the high carb people are just hippie vegetarian liberals, or you'll assume that they're in some kind of government conspiracy to take meat away from people. And in the end, What loses weight for you does not lose weight for them. And people say, well, how the hell do I figure out what my gut microbiome is? Well, do you respond better when you eat diets that are higher in protein and fat? Do you respond better when you eat diets that are higher in carbohydrate? Or you're like me, where you're better somewhere in the middle, right? The whole idea is to give you a starting point to figure these things out. I think the problem with what I just said is people don't want to hear that. They only said, Devon, you do this. Like, I'm going to put my hand on you, like Spock, when he does that thing where he does like the Vulcan mind meld. I'm going to put my hand on you. And I know Jeff Heskoff's going to rip into me because I just did a terrible version of the Vulcan mind meld because I'm doing it in a reflection and I can't do it right. Bottom line is any trainer who tells you they can tell you that is lying and is selling you something. What I can do, what trainers like you can do is say, look, people fit on a spectrum. So shut up, stop fighting with each other. Understand, like you said, calorie deficit is the key. And then work from there, trying to figure out exactly where you fit in that carbs versus fat kind of spectrum. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah. And the important thing is that not only are you giving people just a starting point, but it's not, like you said, just telling people exactly what to do, but it's like, these are the principles to follow. But at the end of the day, they need to build their own eating strategy to follow through with these principles. And then you talked about, like the principle, like eating enough protein, eating enough fiber, and you talk a lot about like high protein, high fiber foods. So can you expand on that a little bit?
I just was on some anecdote in my head. Can I get it out of my head first before I answer that question? So I had a client who was working at the Institute for Advanced Studies. I don't know if people know what that is, but it's a place they send people who are too smart to go to Princeton. They're two totally separate things. And they're going to be all mad at me. I may be wrong on that, but whatever. The bottom line is it's a place where they put a bunch of, like, Oppenheimer was there. All right. The guy they just made the movie about. So he one time said to me, he was in a group and there was this group of scientists that were working on something. And it was very frustrating to him because they all were kind of working in different processes to come to a conclusion for the same answer. And I said to him, that's very interesting because in a meathead way, there's a great story about one time Arnold Schwarzenegger brought the guy who did pumping iron. He brought him into the Gold's Gym and it was back day. And the guy looked around and he saw Ken Waller over here. He saw Franco Columbu over there. He saw Danny Badillo over there. He saw Robbie Robinson over there. Saw Mike Katz over there. And all the greatest bodybuilders of their generation. And he noticed they were all doing something different for back, for the same pattern. One guy was doing pull downs, the guy was doing chin-ups, the other guy was just doing rows. And he said to Arnold, he goes, I've watched all these guys work out. They all do something differently. And yet these are all the 7 best bodybuilders in the world right now. What's going on? And Arnold said, that's because he looked at him like he was nuts. He's like, that's because they're all different. They're all Mr. Universes, but because their bodies are slightly structured different, that's why they don't pose the same. That's why they don't do all the same exercises in the same way. Some guys lift heavier for higher reps. Some guys lift, lighter for higher reps. Some guys lift heavier for lower reps because they kind of figured, they all knew they had to lift weights. They all knew they couldn't eat donuts all day. They all knew they needed protein. They all know they needed steroids. They all know they needed that. But they all knew that once you got off that broad umbrella, even at that world-class level, they're held to the same rules as everybody else. You have these broad principles: eat enough fiber, eat enough protein, calories matter, exercise is vital for supporting weight loss and maintenance of weight loss. We're all held to that same standard. But ultimately, the way you become your own kind of Mr. Universe, maybe you don't want to go that level, you have to figure out how the broad principles fit to you. Mm-hmm. So that was just that tangent. My head is now clear. What was the question again? Sorry.
You emphasized protein and fiber being pretty fundamental in helping.
Okay, now I got it. Yes. So the reason why is, in all the years I've been a trainer, there's been 2 constant things that people have had in their diet that have helped them maintain. There's a whole chapter in the book called Satisfaction. And that is not I'm not being a tribute band to the Rolling Stones. The concept of satisfaction is, I found that if you cannot be satisfied with the diet you're on, you won't make it to 10% of weight loss, let alone 15, let alone 5%. You have to have some element that helps keep you full. Because I think I use a Voltaire quote in the book where I talk about how societies, they go upstairs in work boots and they come down in silk slippers. And we are definitely in America in the silk slipper part of our society. People cannot mention words without offending some people to the point where they melt down. God forbid your uncle has a different political opinion than you. It's not the fact that he's wrong or you disagree with him. You can't even be in the room with him anymore, right? I mean, I get a little wacky tangent I'm going on. I listened to Richard Dreyfuss, the actor, and I'm going to hate myself for this, but the actor who played the bad guy in the Bourne movies, he ate the heart healthy omelet. I can't remember his name, and I just listened to him speak for hours during the Lincoln Douglas debates. The Lincoln Douglas debates were these debates between these two guys. One was Douglas, who was a pro-slavery, and obviously Abraham Lincoln, who was the man. And they argued for like hours upon hours upon hours with each other, and they never once interrupted each other, ever. Right? They literally were discussing the fate of the nation. They never once interrupted each other, never once argued with each other. I mean, now watch the current presidential debates and don't tell me we don't deserve better than that. The bottom line is, I have no idea where I was going with that. Now I just had a brain fart. Oh, about fiber and protein. Every person I've ever met, it's no debate. They have to have something to keep themselves satisfied because we've come so far away from being tough anymore that the second we get hungry, it's all over. Right? The average person, the second they get hungry, they can't handle non-air conditioning. They can't handle the fact their iPhone is the wrong color, right? They can't handle someone believes differently from them. And you have to find some way to stay full. And whether it's fiber or protein and fiber, that is what I have found has kept people the most full and therefore the most satisfied and therefore the most likely to stay on their diet. Now you may argue, not you, Devon, but there may be people out there that argue with me and say, oh, that's not true. I cannot tell you what you've experienced. I cannot tell you what you've seen. I can only tell you after, and here I'm going to pat myself on the back, after 2.5 decades of doing this, I can only tell you what I've seen. And if you tell me I'm wrong, then go pound sand. Because for 2.5 decades, all they've ever seen is that if they have a high-fat, high-fiber diet, they have a low-fat, high-protein diet, a high-protein, high-fiber diet, those are the people who stay most satisfied on their diet the longest and lose the most weight and keep it off. All right. I tend to be more of a fan of protein and fiber. I tend to find that a lot of the people who are just fiber and fat have some kind of misguided, weirdo kind of discrimination against protein. They have all these like bizarre beliefs about kidney function and all that. Mm-hmm. That's neither here nor there. I don't want to open that can of worms. But the reality is that the one of those two or both of those nutrients have to be in your diet for you to stay satisfied. Yes, there are people who have followed the guy, Mark Haub, the Kansas State professor who did the Twinkie diet, right? Mm-hmm. He went on a diet where he had a protein shake, a can of vegetables a day, and then all the rest of his food was in convenience foods like Little Debbie snack cakes and Twinkies. Yes, he did lose weight, but he even said the diet was not sustainable. He was just too damn hungry all the time. Sohee Lee, when I did an article once where she talked about how she had one Snickers bar a day every day through her prep. And it got to the end where she's like, I hate that. I don't know how this is sacrilege to me, but I'm going to say it. I'll hold my nose. I hate Snickers bars. And probably because they were eating up vital calories of protein and fiber, go figure, she could have eaten that would have kept her more full or fuller on less calories.
Right.
So the exact numbers I found is that if you have a lot of weight to lose, you can get away with about 15 to 20 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed. If you have a lot of weight to lose, you can get away with 0.5 to 0.7 grams of protein per pound of body weight. When people get leaner and the stakes get higher and your body starts fighting back because your body loves you and it doesn't want to see you fit in skinny jeans because your body thinks skinny jeans is starvation, then the numbers have to go up because you need more protein and more fiber. Then the numbers go from 0.7 to 1 gram per pound of body weight of protein and up to 20 to 25 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed. Here's the rub. After that point, I find there's a diminishing return for protein and fiber. Even with fiber, when you start getting up to like that 25 to 30 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed, I find that it's not that it doesn't have a diminishing effect. It makes life so physically uncomfortable, if you know what I mean. This isn't opioid-induced constipation. It's kind of the exact opposite of what you'd think. It just doesn't work anymore. It's not practical for most people to follow. Mm-hmm. So those are the exact numbers. Like I said, there is a diminishing return. Once you start going above 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight, I've seen some people do 1.25 grams of protein per pound of body weight. Mm-hmm. After that point, it doesn't seem to blunt hunger as much, if really at all. At that point, your body is so starving for just calories and is so programmed to not want you to be skinny. It's just a matter of, then it's a battle with the refrigerator at that point. But I don't know if I can be any more specific as to why fiber and protein are important or how much you should be consuming when you're trying to lose weight. They just fill people up more than anything. I find that fat tends to satiate people a little bit more. The problem you get with fat is you only need so much of it to function, and it can easily go over the caloric cliff because fat is so calorie dense.
Definitely.
But yeah, the fiber or protein or both have to be in there somewhere. To me, and the thing about fiber that kind of sucks is that fiber really does very little to maintain muscle mass. If anything, right? I have no idea of any research or practical I've ever seen where fiber helps someone maintain muscle. What I have seen is that once you get past that initial weight loss, that 10% of weight loss, you need the protein more to maintain muscle mass. And if I'm going to go off one of my other tangents, this whole Ozempic thing going on. Look, anytime I see someone talk about anything with dieting and they get like a smirk on their face and they do this with their fingers, I know the tide is coming back in. Right? This is Shank's prediction at 4:31 on August 12, 2023. This whole Ozempic pill thing, semaglutide thing, it's going to come back hard on some people. This is not the solution for everybody. All right? Really, for anybody. But what happens is you get not hungry, period. And it doesn't matter whether it's fiber, protein, or carbs. And what I'm finding with a lot of these Ozempic people that I'm my own Shank clinical trial in the gym is that they are losing muscle once they get past that initial fat loss stage, right? So in the beginning, I make the analogy in the book that your body's a lot like, your body looks at you a lot like you like baby back ribs, right? Baby back ribs are awesome because they're like 50% fat, right? So your body is like, oh, cool, I got a lot of fat and a lot of muscle. I think I'll eat the fat right now. But as your fat stores start going down, you start becoming more like London broil. You start becoming lean, right? And now your body doesn't have as much fat to eat on. It has essential fat. So it's going to leave that fat alone because hormonally, that's a whole nother story. It's hormonally blocked from getting to that fat because that fat is last ditch, organ protecting, body functioning fat. It's not going to touch that stuff till the very end, i.e. starvation. It's going to start eating your muscle mass. So what I'm sort of finding with these Ozempoids, I call them, is that they start losing muscle at an incredible rate because they're simply not hungry, which then they think is the greatest thing ever, which to a degree, if your weight is getting to the point where it's threatening your life, it is. But at a certain point, you start losing large amounts of muscle mass on these drugs. And that will come back to bite you in the ass. Number one, because you lose strength, you lose function. You look like a bar of soap with hair on it. I know I've made that analogy before. And the other thing is this little weird thing that I believe, and again, I'm getting this from Lyle McDonald, this idea of the protein leverage hypothesis. The idea your body will drive you to eat till it gets adequate levels of protein. Well, one of the interesting things, I don't know if it was him, he was in an interview with a guy named Jason Leonards, but they were talking about how people, when they start gaining weight back, they keep gaining weight and have hunger even when they get to their previous weight. And one of the arguments was that your body so craves muscle mass until it builds back all of its muscle mass, it will drive you to eat calories. Even if you gain 10, 20 extra pounds of fat, if that muscle mass isn't back, your body keeps driving you from the inside out to eat more. So that's the other thing I'm waiting for. And I still sound horrible. I'm waiting for. When this comes back, and I bet you it will, when this comes back to blow back on people, that's one of the things you're going to see, is that people are going to gain a bunch of weight back, and then what's going to happen is they're going to have no muscle mass to show for it.
Right.
So that's just one other thing I've noticed on the ground floor, the French resistance that I'm part of in the gym floor, is that people are taking this and they're getting the initial weight loss off, and that's awesome. But we've all learned in life, it's all about trade-offs. There are no free lunches. You always pay a price for everything. And the idea that somehow someone invented a drug where there's no downsides, yeah, maybe if you're morbidly obese and you have to lose weight, there is no downside. You'll worry about losing muscle mass later. You probably won't lose muscle mass because your body has so much fat to eat off of. But at a certain point, we know human beings, they get cocky. You know, how many people during the student loan forgiveness have paid off or paid down their student loans? And how many people have gone on trips to Italy? I'd love to know what the answer is to that. Because knowing human beings, I'll tell you what, the answer is not 100% of the people pay their loans off. And it's the same thing with Ozempic. If you're telling me that people who are taking Ozempic are all learning good, they're watching Devon Peterson, right? They're going on Devon Peterson's Instagram page. I know they're not, because you simply do not have enough followers relative to how awesome you are. They're not going on your page and seeing all the things about meal prep, how to cook meals, how to make bland foods taste fantastic, right? They're not using that time, their lack of hunger time, to do that. They're just getting all giggly about losing weight. That's really where those drugs shine. Is they shine for the people who really are in serious physical trouble. We give what's that drug they give to heroin addicts? Methadone, right? There's different things they try to give for smokers, like Ray Liotta, Chantix. Remember that whole thing, right? They give Chantix, all these different things to help people who have physical issues related to behavior. I don't want to say that weight loss is not worth that. And if you're in a serious obese state, then you definitely need to use whatever resource you have available to you. If that means surgery too, then fantastic. But at a certain point, the behaviors have to change. And if you don't get that, then you're never going to keep weight off long-term. Something about you has to die. Something about you has to change. That was once part of you, that was that overweight self.
Right.
I have no idea how I got in that rant, but that's just why people watch this, because they have no idea what's going to happen. Neither do I. I can't even have a script. I just go off. All right. So what else are we going to talk about? Or am I going to pontificate about? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like just what you were saying about
the insights on that, Devon?
Well, I mean, you end up, so when somebody takes it, it blunts their appetite. They don't really have to make that much effort for behavior change. So they end up at the end of it fatter, and not only fatter because they lost a bunch of muscle and then gained the weight back once they stopped taking it, but then they don't have the behaviors changed, and that you're pretty much, you're not even at square one. You're like worse than in square one. So it's like, if you're in an emergency situation or where you need to use that, okay, but also keep in mind that behaviors need to be changed. And then things like eating enough protein and strength training to keep your muscle while you diet are also going to be important.
Yeah, so, as trainers, we're really stuck in a tough situation. We're kind of stuck between the weight loss Fox News people and the weight loss MSNBC people. The MSNBC people think everyone's a victim, and the Fox News people think everyone is just one good decision away from turning their life around, that it's all about willpower. And we know people's brain chemistry isn't the same. We know we live in a world where there's friggin' food in Home Depot. All right. So we understand on one part, we need a major society. Dude, Joey Chestnut's a national hero. Do you know what I mean? The guy who shoves all those hot dogs down his face at the Nathan's, like, so we get that. That's there's so massive social pressures that not only enforce eating, but that seem to accept. And I'm going to go off one of my wacky rants. Let me just stop right there. Let's just say that we don't want to be the bros who constantly say, try willpower. And we don't want to be I don't know who I'd say this is, but like, it's not your fault. It's not your responsibility. It's like, we're stuck in the middle by saying, all right, if you need a kick in the ass as trainers, we're going to give you a kick in the ass and say, knock it off. Stop eating loaves of bread at 2:00 in the morning and trying to figure out why you're not losing weight. And at the same time, if you're someone who's in a tough situation, we've got to say, hey, look, these things are available to you. Go talk to your doctor, right? And that's not even for us to call. I'm talking about society in general. As personal trainers, we have no business prescribing things like that to people. I'm just saying in general, we've got this weird polarization in everything, where either it's you need willpower and you can do it all yourself, or you can't do it yourself and the world owes you something. And it's like, as trainers, we understand it depends on the individual. Some of our clients need their asses kicked, and some clients need a shoulder to cry on, right? Some people need Ozempic, and some people need to get their friggin' act together. Mm-hmm. Right? And it's more of that, but I think people want an either or answer, and it just doesn't work out that way.
Right. I think people need to be willing to take messy action, for like lack of a better term.
Wait. You got to expound upon that. I know this is about my book, but that could be your book, messy action. Go ahead. What is
like you have to, there's not like going to be a black and white answer. Like even in your book, you talk about, okay, body weight times 10. And now you start, and now you have to figure out, okay, is this a calorie deficit for you? Mm-hmm. It's like, you have to start, and then you have to figure it out as you go. Like, there's not going to be like, it's only willpower or it's only Ozempic. You have to take little steps and keep moving forward and learn as you go. So
it's definitely a continuum. It's definitely a spectrum, right? Interesting. I watched this one guy as a comedian. He has, I guess they call it Asperger's, but I don't think you're allowed to call it Asperger's anymore because apparently Asperger was a terrible person or something. I don't know. But he's like somewhere on the autism spectrum. And he's a hilarious comedian. And you can definitely tell this guy isn't Rain Man, right? Right. So he functions very well. He doesn't make very good eye contact. But then you got other people on the autistic spectrum that, have a hard time barely functioning in society. And you see that in a spectrum. So when you say someone's autistic, you really don't know where Einstein was autistic, for crying out loud, apparently, right? And people say he's the smartest guy who ever existed. So somewhere in that spectrum, it's the same thing. We see these spectrums in so many things in our lives, right? We understand the need for freshman football, JV football, and varsity football. We understand their spectrums in terms of development and athletic ability, but we don't seem to understand their spectrums in terms of what people need to do in order to lose weight and what resources they need to make avail themselves to, right? One other thing I talk about, though, in the book is about systems. Mm-hmm. And even then I say, look, I can't tell you what to eat, but here are some potential systems. Like I love when people say, oh, Jenny Craig is terrible, or Weight Watchers are terrible. Well, guess what? I've had people lose weight and keep it off on both those systems. And I had people burn and flail and fail like miserably on those systems. So you have all these different things that are available. Like one of the things I have clients who hate counting calories for whatever reason. They had an overbearing mother or something like that who made them count calories at 7. That actually is a story. That's very sad. That client couldn't count calories for legitimate psychological reasons. So that's where the 5 meals method came from. And what that is basically you count calories once. And you come up with 5 breakfasts, 5 lunches, and 5 dinners. Now, nobody eats 5 breakfasts. So it's like 2 breakfasts, like 5 lunches, and 7 dinners. And as long as those sit somewhere within your caloric and protein needs, don't count calories. Just know every time I eat, this meal, it's going to fit within my caloric needs. Every time I eat this breakfast, it's going to fit within my caloric needs. And then you can also have options for fast food. If I have 2 egg white McDelights, I don't even know if they make those anymore. Let's just say 2 egg McMuffins. I know for my individual caloric needs, those fit in fine. So there's other methods where if you don't want to count calories number by number, you can use the 5 meal methods. We have designated meals that fit somewhere within your calorie continuum if you combine them together. Right. Then I have other clients who are like OCD like me, and they want to control every number. Like they literally look at what's that app they use? The MyFitnessPal, and they're just calculating numbers and finding out different formulas. They're the people who write to MyFitnessPal that their nutrient profile for egg whites is wrong, right? They're the ones who correct that. Yeah. So other people function that way. So even the way you apply the calorie deficit is so individual. And that's why I try not to get too wacko on even anything, because I've seen as long as you're in the calorie deficit, however you get to it is the key thing. People get all wacko about intermittent fasting. Guys, gals, everyone in between. There's nothing magical about intermittent fasting. It puts you on a schedule, all right? It puts you on a schedule and it makes you conscious of what you're eating throughout the day. I'll use her again. There was that video by that Sohee Lee, it's like my grandmother, by Sohee Lee, all right? And when she had that video where she's walking by and she's picking at foods and the guy's, oh no, and she's like eating chips. And at the end of the day, she had like 2,000 calories extra. Well, guess what? That doesn't happen on intermittent fasting because you're only eating within that 8-hour window. So if your problem is you overeat through snacking and picking, intermittent fasting is a superior system for you to control your calorie intake. What it doesn't do is create this hormonal milieu to where you lose weight magically where you wouldn't lose weight on any other diet. It's a lifestyle diet more than anything else. And it makes people who are unconscious of their eating behaviors a little more conscious of their eating behaviors. But in the end, there's restriction. In the end, if you're in a calorie surplus and you're intermittent fasting, you will gain weight. In the end, you will lose so much weight when you're in a calorie deficit consistently, your body will start to fight back, right? And then you got to say, why 10%? Why didn't I just say lose until 15, 20, whatever you want to do? Because within the first 10%, what I have found, not I've found, the doctors have found that I send my clients to, is that there's significant improvements in cholesterol, blood pressure, A1C, which is your blood sugar numbers, and just overall the way your clothes fit and how you feel and how you move. Now, some people need a lot more than that, and that's fantastic. Some people psychologically can't break it up in 10% intervals and have to lose all the weight at once. The downside of that is while it fits your psychology, you never get a chance to practice success. And that's why I do it 10% at a time, because people don't have a weight loss problem. Lots of people have lost weight. They have a problem keeping the weight off. They have a problem succeeding with success. And so what I do is when I have those 10% jumps in there, is I get you to stop and say, maybe this is all I really need. Maybe I'm not the person whose idea of a good time is to go to the Jersey Shore every weekend and stand there with my shirt off while dancing to house music. God bless you if that's what you want. And if you do, you're probably going to lose a lot more than 10% of your body weight, right? But say you're like someone who just wants to look a little better, then maybe you can get away with 10% and avoid all the negative side effects of following too extreme, here I say it, too effective of a diet. Because eventually your body will fight back and people's bodies fight back. Life is not fair. I said in the book, I gave a whole list of dudes who are better looking than I am, right? They've got superior bone structures. They're just so damn handsome, right? Also, a lot of them are rich. If you look at a lot of these people, like the guy Ronaldo, you look at the soccer player, you look at the before and after photos of him before he had money and after he had money, he's a hell of a lot more handsome after he had money because he had his teeth done and God knows what else. The bottom line is life is not fair. And so you've got to make the most of the cards you've been dealt, right? And so for you, if that means you lose 10% body weight and then your body goes haywire, then you need to learn to maintain that and only take slight trips on the wild side. Likewise, I've met other people who can lose 20, 30% of their body mass, be lean as hell and never be hungry. And it sucks and it's not fair. And down deep, we hate those people. But the reality is that's their situation and this is my situation. Right. So that's the other thing is 10%. It kind of lets you come more in tune with it because you lose 10, 15% of your body weight and then you're starving every night. Something inside you got to say, you know what? I can watch the NFL on TV, but it's not necessarily for me to play in the NFL. Right. I can point at the moon and enjoy the moon. That doesn't make me an astronaut. Right. So we don't understand that when we get to the leanest levels, how much genetics plays into that. But anyone I've ever met can lose 10% of their body weight unless they're already very thin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't even know if they need to read this damn thing now. This interview has been so thorough by you. And I've gone on so many tangents, but go ahead, please.
And then you talked about like your 5-meal strategy. And then you talked a lot about anchor meals. And then you talked about like taking a period of time where you might need to completely eliminate certain foods. So can you?
Yeah. So this is an interesting thing that I notice is that every now and then I get someone in the gym who goes off on a rant. Not me. I go off on rants, so I'm talking about someone else's rants about how any diet that eliminates a certain food is evil. You should never be on a diet that's not fully balanced. That if you go on a diet that doesn't have any carbs in it, that you're wrong. Well, no. Because some people they have such an issue with carbohydrates and sugar. I'm not saying they're right to say sugar is evil. I'm not saying they're right to say sugar is wrong. I talk about that in the book. There's nothing wrong with sugar, right? The problem with sugar is it tastes great. It's oftentimes combined with fat, which makes it really, really taste great. And it has no protein or fiber in it, so it doesn't fill you up. But outside of that, there's nothing evil about sugar, right? Oh, sugar lights up the same centers of your brain as cocaine does. Well, so does every time I pet a dog on the street. Right? Am I going to stop petting dogs because it's like doing cocaine? No. People get so wacko about these things, but sometimes people need to go from one extreme to another to kind of, I'm going to say something, this sounds so stupid and poetic coming from someone like me, but they have to balance their heart out, for lack of a better word. And I don't mean this heart, I mean this heart. Is that when you're so over the top in one end of your life, I'll give you an example. There's a biblical example of this. Is that the ancient Hebrews used to have these young men, and if they drank too much alcohol and had too much, fun, they used to go through a period of their lives where they did not cut their hair, they didn't drink alcohol, and I can't remember what the third thing was they did. They weren't allowed to drink of the grape, they weren't allowed to cut their hair, and there was some other thing they couldn't do. I can't remember what it was. But they did not believe that was the way you should live, But they knew that if you had gone one extreme, you had to go the other to bring yourself back to balance. So if your carb intake is so out of control, if you see a pizza and say yes, you may very well need a no carb, low carb diet. One, to reset your taste buds because what you're used to is so ridiculous. Two is change your standards because what you're used to is so ridiculous. And three, just get you basically back to baseline. I understand it's an extreme, but since you're already on this end, pulling you back is what's going to bring you to center. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, some people need no carbs. Some people need to go on low fat. Some people need to, eliminate certain food types. I met a guy once who got sick off vegetables. Don't ask me how that worked, but he went to the doctor. The doctor confirmed his body was having a massive immune response to vegetables. So he went on a low vegetable diet. Tell that to some, and I'm not talking about all vegans and vegetarians. I'm talking about the wackos, right? I'm talking about the ones who won't let go and won't change the subject. Tell them you met a guy whose body gets worse off eating vegetables and they will lose their you know what. Is that everybody? No, but there definitely was a dude who I know who that happened to. So some people need those extremes, but again, it's just to bring them back to balance. They're not supposed to stay there. So, I mean, I have no problem with someone being on Atkins. I've met lots of people who have lost lots of weight and to a degree, and I'll explain this in a second, kept it off on Atkins because even Atkins isn't Atkins. This is what I'm going to say a word. It pisses me off. I remember the first time I actually read Atkins' book. I got it from the Bookworm in Cranberry, New Jersey. It was this old used bookstore that I could only go in for like 10 minutes at a time because like Jerry Seinfeld said, you had an overwhelming urge to go to the bathroom. There were just books everywhere. And I got his actual first edition book from the first or second edition from the Bookworm in Cranberry, New Jersey. And I actually read Atkins' Diet Revolution. Guess what it didn't say? Eat pork rinds all day long. His actual sample diet was enormously healthy. It just didn't have a lot of carbs in it, but it had like salmons and olive oil and vegetables and all this stuff in it. And he was all about finding your critical carbohydrate level, not your no carbohydrate level, but what was the level of carbs you could incorporate into your diet that would work for you, right? So he didn't write the book that people thought he wrote. And that's the key thing is that different people, especially there's always saying you earn your carbs, and I'm a little weird, a little freaked out by that statement. But if you're not an incredibly active person, you probably don't need a ton of carbohydrates in your diet unless your body really functions well on them. So yeah, I mean, even with stuff like that, you may need to eliminate a certain nutrient group to get your body back, not your body, screw the body things. This is the problem as trainers. We love protein, we love carbs, we love sets, we love reps, we love split squats, we love, any exercise has a name in it, Bulgarian split squats, French squats, Romanian deadlifts, like French presses, right? Swiss bar bench presses. But we forget that 90% of this game is behavior. 90% of what makes our clients lose weight has nothing to do with what gets our jollies off. I one time saw two nude-neck powerlifters screaming at each other about whether high bar squats were better or low bar squats were better, right? They were just going nuts. And they were like, the more they argued, the more fueled they got. That is not what our general clients are facing. They are facing a spouse that doesn't give a crap about losing weight. They're facing coworkers. I'll give you an example. I had a client come in the other day, and he said that this one guy brought him in a bunch of hot Krispy Kreme donuts. Not Krispy Kreme donuts, hot Krispy Kreme donuts. And I said to him, well, why'd you eat them? And he said, well, I didn't want to disrespect him for bringing them, brought them in the office for me. And I said, well, what about his respect for your diet? What about his respect for your pancreas and your diabetes? He doesn't have diabetes. I'm just giving you an example. What about his respect for your health? What about his respect for the weight loss efforts you've been putting in front of him all the time? Because every day he sees you eating that salad and grilled chicken. What about respect for you? That's the kind of stuff our clients need to know more about, not about whether low or high bar barbell squat, which is an exercise that 90% of the people who walk in a gym will never want to do, right? Or never will do, or never can do. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of stuff that our clients face. And so some of them, yeah, they need to eliminate entire food groups for a time to bring themselves back to balance. And then slowly incorporate those food groups. Look, I understand there's some alcoholics who can never take a drink ever. Some alcoholics. I understand there are alcoholics. They can never take another drink a day in their life. And that's an extreme circumstance, right? A lot of that is driven by genetics. But the reality is that some clients can incorporate certain foods back into their diets after a certain period of total abstention. I'll give you another example. When I was in college, I did that goofy Bill Phillips Body for Life program. And I remember I was in Forcino Hall at then, it wasn't Trenton State College anymore, but whatever, the College of New Jersey. And I remember I was starving at a 3-hour class. And I got a Coke and I got a peanut butter cups out of the vending machine. And when I put them in my mouth, they literally, Devon, they tasted like cement. Now, 6 months before I did that, I could have popped those two in and been fine. But my taste buds have been so reset by not eating any of that stuff for a period of time that my taste buds literally reset themselves. And what once was okay from a sugar and fat standpoint became completely disgusting to me. So was that a bad thing that I did, that I went on that extreme diet? It wasn't really that extreme. for that amount. No, it actually paid off hugely because it totally changed the way I started eating from that point on. So absolutely, it's yeah. No, I think that that's fine, and I can't stand when people say you shouldn't. No, should you never eat another carb for the rest of your life? That's probably too extreme. I don't know anyone's ever robbed a bank for a bag of bagels. So the idea of a carb addict, it's a little over the top. All right. But yeah, no, I mean, it's a method, it's a tactic, it's a technique that is incredibly valid. So if anyone says that to you again, you always got to say, all right, how does this information apply to me? Because once you get past the calorie deficit, that is I say in the book also, the idea of weight loss is simple globally, it's complex locally. So anything we look at in life, a global economy is a hell of a lot more complex than your household budget. But with weight loss, it's different. But weight loss globally, it's pretty simple. Get in a calorie deficit. Where it becomes complex is how do you apply that to the individual, given how unique and different they are, right? If you have a client doesn't like to cook, well, then how are you going to apply the concept of a calorie deficit, the concept of 0.5 to 0.75 grams of protein per pound of body weight, 15 to 20 grams of fiber per 1,000 calories consumed? How are you going to apply that to that person? The local in weight loss is incredibly complex. The global is as simple as it can get. And the problem with the weight loss industry, it turns the global into some giant mess so it can sell you a book, right? That tells you why their diet's wrong and their diet's right and everyone else's diet is wrong, right? They have to make the global complex because they have nothing to sell at that point. That's maybe one of the downsides for me is that I'm trying to tell people, look, here are the general principles and here are some ideas how you can figure out your own. But it's not like you're going to go like this in osmosis. You're just going to go lose weight. Because this is just trying to help you to figure out what is the work. It's Jewish prayer. You pray to find out what is the work you need to do to make your situation better. You don't just read dead people don't lose weight and all of a sudden you don't manifest it. Weight doesn't just fall off of you. Right? This is influenced a lot by some of my belief systems. And one of my belief systems is you do not do petitional prayer. You not pray for things to get magically better for you. You pray so you get clarity and vision. It's like, these are the things I need to do, or these are the experiments I have to make to figure out what works best for me. One of my clients, client told you, was the Jehovah's Witness. He told me once, he said something like, I can't remember. It was something like, pray like God is in control, work like you're in control. It sounds much cooler when he says that, but basically the bottom line is, understand that you have very little control over things, but work like you have control over everything. That's his belief system. Yeah. But yeah, so now I'm sweating. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I think what you were saying about, what was the thing you were talking about before prayer? What were you talking about? Because I wanted to sum it up, but I forget what you were talking about.
I don't know. We'll have to look at the transcript. I have no idea.
Oh,
I know about extremes and cutting things out of your diet.
Eliminating food. Okay. Yeah. I think just certain types of food are just very easy to overeat. So if you are trying to lose weight, just taking a period of time of removing those foods or really minimizing them it just makes the sticking to your calorie deficit easier. So yeah, I was just,
especially if you typically tend to overeat that food.
Yeah.
Right. For example, one of my clients, lovely woman, she gave me some Olive's baby cakes for my birthday. I'm not right now in a state where I'm eating Olive's baby's cakes. Right. So what I did was I froze them, but then I put them in the freezer and then put them behind a bunch of ice blocks and chicken breasts that I have in the freezer. So I have to look at them. Right. Now, for this couple week period, I'm abstaining from that because that's what I need to kind of bring my body back to balance. My weight started to creep up a little bit. So I kind of went a little extreme and cut back on all of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, that's some people need to do that. And again, that's part of the individualized approach. That's what you have to figure out for yourself. Just the clarity of knowing it comes down to a calorie deficit and everything else is the detail behind that. That's really the best any of us can do to help everybody all at once. Because the message out in the weight loss world is so ridiculous about low carb versus high carb versus protein versus this supplement versus that supplement. Someone asked me why I didn't write about any supplements in the book. Right? I think I talk about like fiber supplements and protein supplements. That's it. Because nobody I've ever seen lose weight and kept it off did it because of a pill. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking pharmaceutical stuff too. The pharmaceutical people who lost weight had to do some type of lifestyle modification along with that pharmaceutical drug in order to keep the weight off. And that's why I don't write a lot about supplements, because I've never, again, I can only write what I know about. And I've never seen supplements play a large part or a significant part in anyone's weight loss in the average person. I'm not talking about these lunatics in the bodybuilding world. I shouldn't call them lunatics, but they are lunatics. I'm not talking about them. All right. I used to be one of them. All right. But I am talking about the average person. The average person, I've just never seen a pill, maybe outside of a multivitamin, really play much of a factor. Right. When you're talking about giving people Yohimbe and stimulants and morning cardio, you're talking about somebody who's lost so much body weight, it's not relevant to the average person. You're talking about someone who's getting ready for a bikini shoot, not someone who's trying to fit into their pants.
Right.
That's why I don't write about supplements really in this book, because they're just not relevant to what I've seen work. I'm not going to write about stuff I don't know. So
another thing I like that you talked about, like we were saying before, it's not just black or white either. It's either willpower or Ozempic, but it's also like you talked about staying satisfied, but you also talked about drinking tuna as a beverage.
Oh yeah.
So like accepting that sometimes, I mean, I think it's just like the principle of it. Like sometimes you have to eat foods that don't taste amazing just to get your protein in and make it easy and convenient.
I always crack up when I see healthy people. I shouldn't say health, people who like part of the health influencer community. Anyone who ever claims that chicken breast and salads and vegetables taste better than ice cream, cookies, and cake is such a mental illness. I don't even know what to say to them anymore. They are Jack LaLanne, right? They're the road to Wellville. They're the original. What do they call that? You would know this better than I would. People who are overly it's like a psychotic, not psychotic. It's a psychological disorder.
Orthorexic.
Yes, thank you. They're the orthorexics, right? If you're saying that and you're not doing it to brainwash yourself, then you're just completely full of it. Nothing, and I mean nothing, that I would eat as a dieter that would help me lose weight consistently, give me protein and fiber in a calorically manageable, tastes better than pepperoni pizza, tastes better than chocolate chip cookies, tastes better than Snickers ice cream bars. Just it doesn't, right? It doesn't taste like dirt and sawdust, right? But it doesn't taste as good, right? So it's, yeah, I mean, that example, the tuna fish helps me kill, if people knows I have oxalate stones, kidney stones. So I have to drink at least 4 of these a day. It's not easy drinking 4 of these a day every day. But one of the little tricks I learned was I was watching this bodybuilder, Mike Pulcianella. I hope I said his name right there. I love that guy. He had a line once. He said, if you eat food and don't lift weights, it just turns to poop. So people always ask him why diet and exercise are so important. But he had this thing where pre-contest, he called tuna a beverage because he was a ripped bodybuilder. Tuna fish is one of the best things you could eat. I need the protein. I need the convenience of having foods that I can bring to work with me that I can eat quickly. I also need something that helps motivate me to get this water down. Tuna fish doesn't taste terrible to me. It really doesn't taste like much of anything to me. But if I can put it in my mouth and use the water to help shove it down, that's just one. Again, you may say, ew, but you're not me, right? Again, it goes back to what I said, get in the calorie deficit and then figure out what are the exact things you need to do. Why? Because I'm supremely motivated to drink water. Because if you've ever passed an oxalate stone or any type of stone, it is about as extreme a motivation to do anything you could imagine, right? I used to eat spinach all the time. I barely eat spinach anymore because it's very high in oxalates. Not that spinach is evil, and you shouldn't eat spinach because it's high in oxalates. But if you're someone who's prone to oxalate stones, spinach is not one of your better choices you can make on a consistent basis.
Right.
So it's just, Excellent. Yes.
Okay. So you started talking about exercise, and I know you have a whole chapter on how to win at exercise. Yes. So do you want to talk about that chapter a little bit?
Yeah, I think the line I'm most proud of in that chapter, and that chapter went all over the place. So I think the line I'm most proud of it is that people take the basic, simple concept of exercise for our clients, and they turn them into a stupid version of the Manhattan Project. Right now, if you don't know what the Manhattan Project was, that was the building of the atomic bomb, the fat boy, what was it again? Fat boy and little man and fat boy. I can't remember what their exact names were. But anyway, fat man and little boy, whatever. It's not important. Go watch Oppenheimer and leave me alone. People make it so complex when all our clients really need to do is build a little muscle, get a little stronger so they can be functionally independent for as long as possible, and be harder to kill. All right. Number one, because if you're too weak and you can't get off the toilet, you're really easy to knock off. All right. And number two is having muscle mass. Muscle mass forms a repository for the nutrients necessary for your immune system to fight disease. There was an article I read a couple of years ago about people who go into the hospital, more muscle mass, have an extremely higher survival rate than people who don't. Muscle mass is very important. Would it be nice if every one of us could do a handstand push-up and then flip a 500-pound tire and do a 300-pound clean and jerk for as many reps as possible? Yes, CrossFit, that would be wonderful. But for the average person, they do not need to do that to build muscle. While you're sitting here crapping all over machines, they are the simple, easy, accessible thing for most people to use. Going and learning how we do a clean and jerk and a box jump while fatigued is not necessarily the best thing for the average person to do. For an extreme exerciser is the water that allows their life to flow. But for the average person, they can't do it. If they can, they'll get hurt, or they lack the skill level or interest to learn the technique to do that stuff safely. And even sometimes in the context you do it, it's impossible to be safe. It's a matter of risk management. So yeah, people get, if you just took one exercise for back, one exercise for chest, one exercise for front of the thighs, one exercise for back of the thighs, one exercise for shoulders, and one exercise for biceps, and one exercise for triceps, and you did that for 6 to 9 sets every week, every 7 days, spread out evenly over the 7 days, use the rep range from 6 to 15. Why? Some people do better with heavier weights and lower reps. Some people do better with lighter weights and higher reps. Beginners usually do better with higher reps because it gives them more practice, right? If you were to do that consistently and move the weight up over time and get better at the execution, I don't care if you're using a machine circuit, you will build muscle. You will improve your health. Will you be ready to retake Omaha Beach? Will you be ready to win the CrossFit Games? Will you be ready to win the World's Strongest Man contest? Will you be ready to take your shirt off and make people have a heart attack because you look so amazing? No. But that's not what we're talking about here. All right. We're talking about what do our clients need? They need to build some muscle. That stuff is wonderful, but that's so far down the road that to focus on that stuff now is insane. It just won't work. And people take these, and here's the thing as a trainer, I love using complex exercise with clients because they do pay off more. Yes, Mr. Barbell guy, I know you want to marry your barbell. And yes, barbell squats have a huge carryover to a lot of things. Yes, deadlifting with a barbell has a huge carryover to a lot of things. Yes, the bench press uses a lot of muscle mass and allows you to use more weight through a bigger range of motion than most any machine exercise. Congratulations. I'm happy for you. Shoulder presses are superior to everything. I'm happy for you in your 4 exercises. Here's the problem. I see someone on a Monday. I don't see them again until the following Monday. They are in the gym on their own for the next 2 to 3 sessions. I need something that they can repeat safely and effectively till the next time I see them. And then when I'm with them, if I want to do the barbell squats or the kettlebell squats or all that fancy, sexy stuff that you act like is the lifeblood of exercise, that no one can get gains at exercise unless they do these things, it's not going to work. I'll do that stuff on Monday with them, and then they can do their machine exercises on Wednesday and Friday, or their simple dumbbell exercises or their simple band exercises on Wednesday and Friday, and they can get the volume in they need and add the load to the exercise they need to build muscle. All right? But I can't teach them a barbell squat and then have them screw up on Wednesday and Friday and get themselves hurt and get nothing out of it. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it makes me nuts because what happens is these people are in weightlifting gyms. So they're surrounded by weightlifters. People who are largely, although not exclusively, are largely built for weightlifting. Even if they're not built for lifting, they're motivated to do it. They want to be there. They like the idea of lifting heavy, heavy barbells on their back and over their heads and off the ground. Right? So they've got this kind of echo chamber they live in where there's only 4 exercises that really matter. Right? And maybe we do leg press if you're not strong enough, but whatever. It's, you know, they see a leg extension or leg curl machine, or they see a chest press machine or a lat pull down, and they can't handle it. And they can't handle it because of who the people are they surround themselves with. Right? So it's the people I surround myself with are people who are interested in other things, but understand they need to use exercise. To quote Jeff Ezikoff, they need exercise to make what they do outside the gym better. Right? And so they're not really invested in learning all those exercises, regardless of how superior they may be. So that's why I made it, the exercise chapter, so unsexy. That's why I made even the cardio part of the weight. Because again, very few people have the orthopedic health and the intensity and the capacity to burn enough calories at exercise for it to be a primary form for them to lose weight. It's a phenomenal way for building health. It's a phenomenal way for offsetting like things like Alzheimer's and stuff like that. And it's a great way to add supplemental calorie burn. If you're a smaller person, doing a 300 to 400 calorie workout a day can let you eat more food and still lose weight. Right? So the exercise has a value and is certainly essential for people who want to keep weight off long term in terms of maintenance of muscle mass and improvement of function. And again, that little extra calorie burn it gives. But even then, I didn't write a ton about intervals and stuff like that because they really just don't make that big of a difference. They just don't. And for most people are incapable of doing them long term. And as a trainer, I'm more concerned about, all right, what you can do in a 6 to 8 window, I'm happy for you, but what's your exit plan? And I say that same thing with diet. You can basically do anything for 6 to 8 weeks, but what's your exit plan? What are you going to do after that doesn't work out anymore? You know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, like you said, it's pretty simple. Like getting in the gym, you want to build or at least keep your muscle. You want to build a little bit of strength, like getting in 6 to 9 sets per week of each muscle group. Use challenging weight, but good form in the 6 to 15 rep range. And it's really not that much more complicated beyond that. Like you don't have to be, your legs don't have to be like jello leaving the gym. Like you don't have to be like drenched in sweat. It's really just comes down to challenging yourself within those parameters that you listed and then trying to improve within those barriers.
Don't I quote you somewhere in the book where I say something along the lines of, oh, you want to accomplish this, great, you still have to build muscle. Oh, you want to accomplish this, great, you still have to build muscle. Oh, you want to look like Gwyneth Paltrow. Well, maybe that's a bad example. Oh, you want to look like so-and-so, great, you still have to build muscle. Every goal you have in the gym to some level or another, you want to build bone density, guess what? You're probably going to build some muscle along with that to get that bone density you want. So you can lift weight heavy enough to actually challenge the bone tissue itself. Everything comes back to you have to build some muscle. And I know some nudneck's going to say, they're going to turn everyone to bodybuilders. Well, you know what? For the first 6 months to a year, maybe everyone should be a bodybuilder, right? Because their primary goal is to build muscle, not hurt themselves. So then once you get, and yeah, I know you're not going to do, no, not everyone has to be a bodybuilder. But in the beginning, you're really doing body parts and you're really trying to overload specific, simple exercise. Now, look, if you want to get, yes, if you want to be really good at basketball or really good at golf or really good at like weightlifting, Olympic weightlifting or football or wrestling or any sport, what I just said will not work. It just won't. You need to use large amounts of muscle mass with heavy weights through huge ranges of motion, or in the case of tennis players and golfers, you need to use more complex movement patterns. That's not necessarily heavy weights. Right. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about people who are trying to get off that first 10% and improve the quality of their life. And they can do that. And it just makes me want to, I don't cry. Well, I do cry, but not about stuff like this. It makes me so upset that it's been made so overly complex and inaccessible by the field that I work in. Because it really, for the beginners, it isn't that big of a deal. It's like, I need an individualized program. You're a beginner. If it's a lat pull down versus a row because you have arthritis in your shoulder, you don't have the shoulder flexion to go up here, then fantastic. That's individualized. But it's not like you need a special N1, row here with the hand behind the head and the leg up in the air, and you got to do lat pull downs here for the iliac fibers. It's like, oh, I'm really getting. I should have the shoes on, but whatever. I got the special lat fibers. That may work for a bodybuilder who's got to get that one little piece of muscle, but for the average person, no. And if you're like, oh, they got to learn single arm dumbbell rows, you try to get a beginner who's locked in thoracic kyphosis and has overactive traps to do a single arm dumbbell row with no core control, right? You're not going to build any muscle that way because you're going to spend the first 7 months just trying to get them into this position. But if you can put them on the freaking Kaiser row, right? You could put dead people on the Kaiser row and build muscle. You know what I mean? Because the thing is, you just sit in position and you do this. Not dead people, but you get the point, right? Or put them on a techno gym row or whatever. You put anyone on one of those machines, they're basically locked into position. Yeah, they'll probably still screw it up, but you can teach them how to do it better. And then in the meantime, if you want to work on all your corrective stuff and teach them the basics of core control and thoracic extension and lat activation, in between sets, you can progress them up to a single arm dumbbell row. Because guess what? Yes, a single arm dumbbell row is 10 times more effective than a seated Kaiser air-filled row. For who, though? For the beginner who can't do anything right? It is the worst exercise. It is completely ineffective because they can't do the exercise right to work the correct muscles. So while it, in an absolute stance, is a way better exercise, it kind of isn't for certain populations. And yes, maybe one day we want to progress them up to that exercise. Maybe we don't. Maybe they use the Kaiser row, and God forbid to all the exercise neurotics, maybe they never need to do a single arm dumbbell row, so they hate themselves a little less. All right, because that's what the exercise people don't get. Right? There's some people who actually like themselves as they are and just need exercise to make their lives work a little better. They don't need exercise to make them not hate themselves as much. Right? Present company included. I'm not trying to say that's not why I got into this. But the reality is that some people just don't need that complex approach. And that's why I try to approach that in the book. Say, look, these are the basic needs that you have. And if you can move up weight or move up sets or move up reps or move up the effectiveness of the exercise in terms of you feel it in the targeted muscles more, that will be enough to get you where you need to go. And then if you want to get into the superstar sexy world, then yeah, that's going to require a lot more of a complex approach.
Right.
But for right now, that's not what you need. You're the person in credit card debt who needs to learn how to spend less than you're earning. You don't need to know about whether I choose a Roth or a regular IRA. Should I invest my money in T-bills or go into real estate? What about gold? If you're in debt, you've got to take care of that first, right? You don't need that. That's the analogy. You are a person in $25,000 of credit card debt who's, paying 70% of your income in rent, right? That's who you are when you're an out-of-shape person who walks into the gym. And the last thing you need to do is buy real estate to hedge against inflation, right? You need to get the basic stuff down. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. So like with the row variations, it's like you need to choose a more simple, stable variation to make sure you can do it correctly, feel the right muscle, rather than trying to do a complex variation with too much stuff going on, and then you never really get it.
You remind me sometime on these calls, when I was a little kid, I used to watch the Kung Fu movies. And because of the translation and language, whatever they were speaking, I guess the movies were based out of Hong Kong or out of Taiwan.
Yeah.
The Chinese language did not translate directly to English. And so the words would be like, the guy would say like 70 things and he'd be like, I don't like you. And the guy would say like 50 things and be like, I'm going to kick your ass. Because I guess they didn't like correlate exactly over, or maybe the interpreter was really bad. I have no idea. But that's why I love having you on these. One, I like seeing you. But number two is I'll go off on this like insane rant and you'll go, so Mike, what you're saying is, and you'll say like 5 things. I'm like, yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
So that's awesome.
Well, I think it's important for you to go off on these tangents and tell these stories, because I think stories really, instead of just giving someone a basic list, I think the stories can really help people learn a lot better. But I think also sometimes people can be like, wait, what did he mean by that? So that's why I just wanted to.
Yeah, no, you're definitely my, what did you mean by that filter? That's really good.
Well, just when you started to go off on the Kaiser row and dumbbell row, and I know the people that I know that watch these would have no idea what you're talking about. So
it's funny, when I started going off on that rant, I actually started to like float out of my body and I was looking down on myself. Like, what are you doing down there? And like when I was out of body, when people say they die and they look at themselves, I was actually like looking at my bald spot from up there and I'm like, what the hell are you doing? So thank you for bringing this back to earth.
Okay, you're welcome. Yeah, and then you talked about the value of moving on. So
Owen.
That means.
Oh wait, I think I gave the guy's real name away. What name do I use in the book? I hope I didn't use his real name. Crap.
I use a lot of stories about a lot of different guys, so I can't.
The problem is with these books, unless it was someone famous like Eddie Hall or someone like that, who's like a public figure, or Mark Wahlberg or something like that, I couldn't use actual people's names. I'm sorry. Everyone forget that name I just said. Bobby, the happiest man in the history of fitness. So this is a guy I once trained. This is over 20 years ago. Well over, it might be before 9/11. And he came into the gym and he wasn't like overweight, but he was like soft. And he was this really wonderful guy. You could tell just he wasn't an exercise guy, right? He wasn't going to be doing shrugs on the Smith machine anytime soon. And he came in and he said, I want you to help me with one thing. He said, I want to be able to touch my toes. And I said, why? And he told me because he had this gym teacher who looked just like me in high school. And or it was middle school, maybe it was 7th grade. I don't remember. I wrote it. I had to change so much in this to protect people's identities. And he said the guy used to scream at him and tell him he was nothing because he couldn't touch his toes. I mean, it's come on. No wonder no one likes to exercise. These are our representatives. And so within 3 sessions, it really wasn't that hard. It was just a bunch of basic stretches, mobile. Once I stretched the guy's calves, he got halfway down to his toes. He literally touched his toes. I remember this guy because he used to love this steakhouse in North Jersey called Sammy's. And he used to love it because they cooked their French fries in beef fat. All right, so that's how not bodybuilder this guy was. He touched his toes halfway through the 3rd session or 4th session, I can't remember. He smiled, he shook my hand, and then he walked, because this gym had a basement. It was the New York Sports Club in Princeton. He walked out of the basement, up the stairs, and just disappeared like a fart in a tornado. All right. That's how absolute it was. I'm not saying he was like a fart. I'm just using that as an analogy. And I was like, oh, maybe he just went to the bathroom because he was so excited that he finally touched his toes. He had to pee. I know when I get excited, sometimes I have to pee. He just never came back. He still had like 2.5 sessions left. He never came back to the gym. And I remember I asked some guy he was friends with, they worked together, some big pharma company or engineering, I can't remember what it was. And I said to him, I said, what happened to Bobby? And he's like, oh, yeah, he wanted me to tell you. He said, thank you. And he's not coming back. He achieved everything he wanted in exercise. This guy, unlike every bodybuilder I know, who is just built so tremendously. I mean, they look amazing. These people kill themselves, and it shows. They've got amazing physiques. Unlike every powerlifter who lifts such weights that are so enormous, it astounds you that a human being could do that, right? Because they literally are that strong. Outside of every jiu-jitsu guy and gal I've ever known, who could twist you in a pretzel in more different ways in a minute than you could imagine. This guy was satisfied. He had a set goal. He knew what he wanted from exercise, and he got it, and then he moved on with his life. To this day, actually, I wound up hearing from him years later. He actually wound up being able to maintain his toe touch, even like 50, 60 years old, because he just did the exercises I showed him every day. But he was so much happier than people who had so much more. You know, I had a client who told me a story once about when he was a kid. They were very poor where they lived in India. And he asked his dad for a bike. And all his dad could get him was the bike frame. And then he took the bike frame and over 2 years, put all the parts together and made himself a workable bicycle. And one day he was sitting there and he was having a hard time because he was trying to figure out which color cell phone his kid said he wanted, like which iPhone color he wanted. And he realized like how happy he was just to have that bike frame. And then how amazing he felt after 2 years of picking up scrap parts all over he lived in a friggin' village, for crying out loud, all over the village, of being able to build that bike and then ride it. How happy he was with that. And yet he was worried about having, freaking his kid out by getting him the wrong color cell phone. This guy was so happy that he had it because he had something to move on from. And that's the problem. If you're not going to become part of the weightlifter bodybuilder community that you and I are part of, it's like you're never satisfied, right? You're never happy. And no matter what you do, there's always something you could do better. There was a story, I think, a wrestling coach, I think his name was John Johnson. I wrestled with him at Trent State. I don't know if he told me this story or it was a guy named Royce Alger. Actually, Royce Alger told this story. He was a former Iowa wrestler. And this guy, John Smith, who was a 2-time Olympic gold medalist, every time he would autograph something that had to do with when he won the 92 Olympics, he would put a mark on it. And Alger said to him, well, why, John Smith, you are the greatest American wrestler ever. You've won 6 straight gold medals in the Worlds and Olympics. No one's ever done that. People have won more medals, but no one's ever done that. Why do you put a mark on everything that you relate to the 1992 Olympics? And he said, because I lost a match at those Olympics and I'll never forget it. So he lost. The way the wrestling worked was he beat a guy by more points than the guy he lost to. So he moved to the gold medal round and won. But even to this day, he couldn't let that go. And yeah, that made him a great performer. What's the point? You're not trying to become a great performer when you're trying to lose a little bit of weight, when you're trying to get a little bit more healthy. Yes, great performers will never be satisfied. They will always find something wrong with what they did. They will never be able to walk away. But that is it's inspirational, yes. But at the same time, that's the downside when we look to those people to inform us as to what we need to do to help our clients get to where they want to get to. Because now you're starting to see a lot of blowback this in the weightlifting community. There are people who are now asking, does my football player really need to be able to deadlift 600 pounds? Does he really need to do that? Or is that just so much weight that it's just going to cause more risk for injury that's going to help him on the field? Right? Even professional athletes are getting to the point where they're saying, you know what? Is this in powerlifting? There's a certain point where lifting more weight is not going to do us any good, and the risk for injury is going to go up. Well, guess how it applies to diet? There's going to be a certain point where you lose enough weight to where losing more weight is not going to make you any healthier. It's actually going to do the exact opposite. It's not going to make you any happier, and it's going to put you at risk for blowback because your body is going to start to fight back. And that's how I think that applies to, that's how I know it applies to the average person. They think that weight loss is just this thing you keep doing until you're done doing it, without realizing your body has a millions of year old system designed to stop you from losing weight. And it will fight you to the death in order to keep you from losing too much weight. Compound that with the world you live in nowadays, and you have to understand that it is so easy. There is a Popeye's fried chicken in eye view from my back. You know, you lived in Hamilton.
I've been there many times.
Every fast food place in the planet exists in Hamilton, within minutes from my home, right? Good luck doing that when you're starving on sub-maintenance calories. So you have to have a point to move on. And I even give people examples. Like, I have female clients who, God forbid, only incline dumbbell bench press 25 to 30 pound dumbbells. And they rarely if ever go heavier than that. And the weightlifter community freaks out. Oh, you can't say that. Well, guess what? At 25 to 30 pound dumbbells for a woman around 140 to 160 pounds, if she does not have, you know, John Smith winning the Olympic gold medal goals, that is enough for her. And if she keeps moving the weight up, now all of a sudden we're talking a greater commitment in terms of time in the gym, recovery from exercise, nutritional applications. All of a sudden she starts playing a game she never wanted to play in the first place. All she wanted to do was that Ezekovian move. The 25 to 30 pound dumbbells allowed her to do what she did outside the gym better, right? The 10% of weight loss allowed them to do what they do outside the gym better. It allowed them to get a better blood test. Losing another 10% will not, or have a minuscule improvement, right? Whether your blood pressure is 110 over 70 or 100 over 60, I'm not even sure if that even makes any difference in terms of your longevity. I have low blood pressure, so I can tell you when you go to one extreme to the other, it actually becomes unhealthy, all right? So yeah, that to me, I think is the critical difference between the person I wrote this book for and the hardhead weightlifter community. And let me be positive about that. The high-end, high achiever community, right? You start playing again. You start going into places that you never signed up for. And that makes so many people and the people we train fail because they can't deal with the hunger anymore. They can't deal with you give the average powerlifter a torn tricep and their first question is, all right, when can I get back under the barbell? You know, you tear the tricep of an average person, never show them in the gym ever again. Yeah, so that's kind of the world I used to live in as an athlete and what I had to get slapped in the face as if I wanted to become a successful personal trainer is that the people I train are not the people I used to be or wish I was or wish I could go back to. Because that's how you'll just booby trap. You'll blow up the whole system. Now, could you have been a little bit more balanced than Bobby and not just walk out after touching toes? Probably. But there's a big lesson in that.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, that guy was happier in the gym than any day I've ever been in my life. Because again, when I hit that bench press, it wasn't enough. When I hit that deadlift, it wasn't enough. And that's what drove me to lift very heavy weights. That's what drives world-class performers. But again, you're not a world-class performer. And it'll backfire on you for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, and like moving on, just to clarify, but
Devon,
also
please do your magic, sum it all up.
But also a lot of the behaviors that you build, like having calorie awareness, eating a decent amount of protein and fiber, having your anchor meals, these behaviors still have to be repeated, maybe with a little bit more flexibility, but these behaviors still have to be repeated if you want to maintain your weight loss. Like, it's not just like moving on as in go back to eating Popeyes multiple times a week and not really planning your nutrition and just not really being aware or having a strategy or a system.
Right.
So like there's still some sort of system and intention in place that you need to have, but moving on as in you're not trying to be like Gwyneth Paltrow.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think people want everything in life is a trade-off. They like to believe what they want is not a trade-off, but it is. If you want to get really, really high weightlifting numbers and build a really, really incredible physique, there's going to be a trade-off in terms of not just time invested, but the injuries you're going to have to deal with. It's just, now you don't go outwardly overly injure yourself on purpose, but there's no way you redline an engine without every now and then blowing it out. All right. There's no way that, you're not going to pay lifelong consequences to lifting very heavy weights. I do that now. I lift heavy weights through my mid 30s. And now I have all types of problems in my body long-term from that. Would I give that up? No, because that's who I was at the time in my life. And I couldn't change that, but there's just a reality to it. So fine, accept that. But the average person doesn't need that. And that's where they get kind of lost, because then they walk into that world and they don't realize. It's just, how do I put this? I have a lot of very smart people with more degrees than a thermometer, and what they've had to sacrifice in terms of everything, family, their health, their time, the country they lived in. And some of these people, they live in 12 different countries, some of them, because that's where the cutting edge research and all that stuff was. They understand that everything else is a trade-off in life, but they don't seem to get that with diet and exercise. And I think, I say maybe closing out is that something has got to give. There has to be restriction in some way. Something about you has to change. It's since so much of this is about behavior and so little of it is about why I wrote this is I wanted this to give you all the nuts and bolts. I wanted to get rid of all these wacky debates that people waste time on. Mm-hmm. And say, right, here is the nuts and bolts. Now I got to get busy with the other 90%, which is not just figuring out, how do I say to that guy who brings the donuts into work, go buzz off in the nicest way possible, maybe not the nicest way possible. How do I deal with the fact that I can't eat whatever I want, whenever I want anymore? Every time someone brings cake into the office, and I use the example of Pat, anytime you bring cake into the office, if you're trying to get rid of that 10%, that cake is not for you. If you're in maintenance, then it's a choice. Do I want to use my calories on that? But if you're losing 10% of your weight and they bring a cake in for someone's birthday, and you're made to feel bad for saying, no, I don't want any of that, well, then you know what? That's the 90% you have to work on dealing with, is being much more assertive in that situation and telling people, look, this is what I'm up against. This is my goals. This is what I'm trying to do. My father died of a heart attack, right? I am not better than I am my father from a health standpoint, which means if I don't do the right things, I will die of a heart attack. That is the reality of things. And I remember one time I was helping my parents move out of this house they were in while they were building another house. And I fell through the front lawn. There was an abandoned well. It's like a septic tank or a well in the front lawn. And I was carrying a piece of furniture because that's what I did back then. And I started sinking into the floor. And half my body wound up in this putrid abandoned well. And the only thing that kept me from falling into the well was I had these humongous coffee table-like lats and traps So they literally hovered me above the hole. I was too thick to fall in the hole. So not knocking everything about heavy weightlifting. I had no change of clothes. So I had to wear my dad's clothes, which was a pair of jean shorts, white socks up to my calves, blue loafers, and a white t-shirt. All right. There was a mirror on the floor because they were moving out of the house. After I put this getup on, I looked in the mirror and I thought I was looking at my dad. And at that point, I realized I am my father. I realized whatever got him, whether it's kidney stones, whether it was kidney disease, whether it was a heart attack, that was waiting for me if I didn't do certain things correctly. There's a very sobering moment for me, right? So I realized that things could not continue the way they were because that would be what's waiting for me. That was the powerlessness of my life. And I think people don't get that term, is that something has got to give, that you cannot live life the way you used to live it if this is your goal, right? Mm-hmm. If your goal is to be a world-class athlete, then guess what? It's what you don't do outside the gym that factors as much in your success as what you do inside the gym, right? Unless you're some genetic freak who can get away with anything. And even then, that eventually catches up with those people. So yeah, that's the world we live in right now. The America where, you know, the Food Network does its whole porn, you know, disguised as food, which is exactly what it is, by the way. If you ever watch those food shows, I mean, it's like, there's some fetish stuff going on in those things. I'm sorry. But if you think you're going to live in that world and still lose weight, that ain't happening. I remember after that moment, I had DVR'd a bunch of cooking shows. I used to love watching them while eating biscuits. And I literally looked at them and I was revulsed by them. I deleted them all out of the DVR because I knew the drive-ins, dive-ins, and dives, whatever, the guy with the spiky hair. Yeah, that show. I knew that couldn't be part of my life anymore for me because it's putting me into a subculture, which is like, this is the best bolognese I ever had. Like, I couldn't be watching the Food Network because all it's doing was make me hungry and go want to eat.
Yeah.
And that's the world we live in. So I almost tell people, if you want to lose weight in modern America, you got to kind of form your own little Vatican. Now, that may be offending some people, but, you know, the Vatican's like a little country inside a country. You got to kind of form your own little world and hang out with your own kind of people, right? And not allow that stuff in. And if you have a spouse that doesn't want to do that, then guess what? That's your weight challenge, not low carb versus high carb versus machines versus free weights versus low bar versus high bar squat. That's your problem, right? Because if your spouse is constantly eating crap, how are you going to keep that out of your world? You're not going to, right? If your spouse isn't on the same page as you, then that's your issue. And I can't fix that. You've got to fix that. There's no book. I'm not a psych. I can't write a book about that. So that's what I think people really have to do. They have to have kind of a different world than the one we live in, because the one we live in is just economically and socially not conducive to people losing weight, right? The CEO of, I think it was Pepsi, once tried to like do something about healthy snacks and the stock went down. She almost lost her job, right? Oh, wow. Yes. I mean, that's how tied in this is. And I'll give another story. So I had a guy once I trained who manufactured a protein bar in Japan, and people wouldn't eat the protein bar. I couldn't put this in the book because it was impossible for me to kind of tell the whole story without giving away too much of the person's identity. But basically, they manufactured a protein bar in Japan that was 120 calories, and no one would buy it because it was too big. They manufactured the same protein bar in the United States, and it was 180 calories, and no one would eat it because it was too small, right? So I don't tell you everything about the MSNBC culture half of the we're all victims kind of thing, is that's real and that's there. Yeah, I mean, that's just that then what you have to do is create your own existence in that way and lose weight like that. And yeah, does it suck? Yeah, but so does all the other consequences if you don't make that decision. So,
all right. Yeah. I mean, your environment is going to dictate a huge part of your success. If you're constantly surrounding yourself with just watching all this food that tastes really good, and it's like hyper palatable food on steroids, like the diners, drive-ins. So it's like French fries with some sort of like high fat sauce with bacon bits with.
Yeah. Why do they always put butter and olive oil in the same dish? You could put me in a pot and put butter and olive oil. I'd probably taste good. You know, I'm just thinking about this. This is a guy who I quote in the book. and he did very nice. He did a review of the book for me. His name's Jason Leenaerts. You can look him up online. I can't pronounce. I think it's Leenaarts. I'll put it in the show notes when I post this on YouTube. But he is very open to the fact he used to be a drug addict, and he talks about how he literally had to like abandon entire groups of people that he associated with in order to stay sober. You know, and I'm not trying to compare drug addiction to brownies. I mean, in some ways, there are some consequences people experience that are deadly from certain foods. But his point being is he had to literally change his entire social circle in order to be able to stay sober and live the life. And he has a beautiful wife and a beautiful child now. So obviously the benefits of staying sober paid off for him. He has a successful business. He owns his own gym, has a lot of great stuff going on in his life. Because at one point he made the decision to get sober. And that decision to be sober, and again, I'm not leaking, the guy talks about this all the time. He had to make that decision to have all the wonderful things he has in his life now, and part and parcel, whatever the hell that means, of that decision. I always say these things, and I always wonder what the hell they even mean. But part and parcel of that was he had to say goodbye to a lot of people. He had to say goodbye to a lot of environments. I know people who had to leave the town and the states that they live in because of addiction issues. They just couldn't be in the same city. I had a client once who was an alcoholic who lived in Boston and didn't go back to Boston for 30 years until he had a business thing there. And he said it was the worst. He literally landed in Boston, thought, oh, this isn't bad. I'm in whatever, the McCarran Airport, wherever it is. He got to his hotel room. He said he started to shake because just being in the city of Boston, whether it was the smell of Boston or maybe it had something to do with just psychologically, he literally started to shake. And the first thing he did was he went and found a meeting, an AA meeting that he could go to, because that's how powerful just the environment was. Now, I'm not saying you never go in your living room ever again or you blow up your kitchen. I'm not saying something extreme like that. But understand that these are the decisions that people have to make if they've got that serious of a problem. And on some level, you've got to address your problem as seriously as they did. Because again, there's just some games, there's some battles you can't win, right? And you got to be adult enough and you have to be able to admit that and understand that on the other side of that sacrifice is something else that actually is much better. But I think a lot of people can't see that. You know, all they can see is what the pizza and the wings every night, the McDonald's every night, the chocolate chip muffins every night. They can see what that brings them, but they don't see what's on the other side of it. And that in its own way can be just that. Look, I'm never going to say that broccoli tastes as good as a donut, but I can tell you that being leaner and healthier and being able to look in that mirror and realize, no, I'm not going to die of a heart attack, at least not by my own making. There's a lot of great things that go along with that. If you don't believe me, go look that guy's name up and look at the smile on his face when he's with his wife and his kids. And you understand that there's a lot of wonderful things on the other side of sobriety, right? And sometimes people can't get that in the moment, and whether it's drugs or food or whatever, it's really a substitute for something else, and it's usually a substitute for something else that's much, much, much more meaningful and has a lot more purpose behind it. So yeah,
right, yeah. Well, those were really good stories. I think like to give like a less serious but also practical examples, like with environment, like maybe when someone's dieting, losing their 10%, they hang out with certain people less, like the people that they know like to their foodie friends that like to cook a lot and eat and drink a lot. And maybe during their 10%, losing their 10%, they don't keep certain food, like we talked about, like the eliminating certain food. They don't keep certain foods in the house. They don't go to Popeyes. Like, so I think like your stories were good, but then like bringing it back to
a little intense,
like the day-to-day stuff that someone losing the 10% is going to face. It's like the food they bring into their house and the people they're spending the most time around. Those are the two things that they need to be focusing on controlling the most, in terms of making it easier for them to lose that first.
I actually use in the book, I believe I talk about trash cans. You know, one of the best weight loss tools you have is a trash can. Why? Because someone gives you leftovers that you know you don't want to eat, but you will eat. They're not going to know that you drove down the road and threw it in the garbage can, right? They're not going to know, you know, if someone says that you need to take this with you, you need to eat this. They don't know if you're, I mean, look, those baby cakes are sitting in my freezer right now because I consider that a sin to throw those out. But I also have strategies. I freeze them and hide them behind other stuff, and they'll be fine till I'm ready to eat them. That's not an issue. But if you know that you have foods that are an issue like that for you, you just don't have them around. And if that's a problem, throw them out. It's the ultimate weight loss tool. Just throw it in the trash. You know, if you don't want to eat if you want to eat a small portion of it, fine. Eat half of whatever you're going to eat and throw the other half out. I remember one time I was hanging out with a common friend of ours who couldn't stop eating potato chips. And he said to me, I can't stop eating these potato chips. I said, I can get you to stop eating these potato chips. And I took them and I spit in the bag. Now, you have certain relationships with certain people you can do that with. That's a very extreme example, and you didn't eat any more of those potato chips, right? Call it the spit in the bag diet. But, you have to hire someone to walk around spitting on your food so you don't eat any more of it. Yeah, I mean, that's just, yeah. Okay. All right. I think I've done. I think I've said enough. Anything else you have to ask or you want to clarify or bring back to orbit, bring out of orbit?
No, I think we covered the most important things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Devon, thank you for this opportunity to have me come talk about my book, Dead People Don't Lose Weight, available on Amazon.com. And thank you very much also for being the interpreter.
Yeah, of course.
I think we got the best of both worlds here. We got the people who are like, dude, shut up and just tell me what I need to know. And then we have the people who want the story. They got both of them. So that's good.
Got to have that balance.
Yeah, you're a good foil to my ranting and ramblings. That's good.
Oh, good. I'm glad.
So am I. All right. I will talk to you later. Thank you, Devon. Oh, is there anything you want to talk about before we go? Since I've been talking about dead people don't lose weight so much.
I think anything else would be overkill.
I know I always put your Instagram links in the show notes.
Yeah.
What else am I putting in the show notes? Instagram links, anything else?
I think just Instagram is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's it. All right. Thank you, Devon.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.